I think it's a bizarre statement to make. And lastly, we also talked about how Don't Ask, Don't Tell can and should be enforced now, and how that will change.
I agree. Look, I never served in the military. I applied. Given my age, I had applied in the period between wars. They didn't need people when I was of draft age. There was a program I tried to sign up for. They had too many people in it. They turned me down. But I remember saying, well, I'm going to lie about this. That is one thing, though, again, the president should get credit for. Because, well, they did talk about waiting to repeal it. They are going to finally enforce it right. The way the policy was put in, it wasn't a good policy, but it wasn't as bad as it had been in practice. They're not supposed to go through your emails. They're not supposed to listen to people snoop on you. They're not supposed to say, oh, I saw him, or I read this or that letter that he sent. And they apparently are going to start enforcing it more strictly now, which means that the overwhelming number of the discharges will stop. So even though we may not get the total repeal right away, although I hope we will, and I'm working for it, we are going to see a very substantial drop in the discharges. Because while they can't undo the policy absolutely by executive order, they can enforce it appropriately. Some of us wrote to the president last year and told him that, and that's apparently what they're going to do.
We also talked, Barney Frank has worked a lot on financial reform recently, and we recently had new credit card regulations, what credit cards have to do, what has to be on your bill. And one of the big issues is, given Scott Brown's win in Massachusetts and given the state of the House and Congress, will much really be able to happen? Here's what Barney Frank had to say.
Oh, I was disappointed that he says he doesn't support the president's proposal to tax the banks to make back the money that they had to, the federal government might have lost through the TARP program. Although many of the banks have paid it back, there's still some loss that came from other factors. Yeah, that's very much an issue in the Senate right now. And what we've done with credit cards, for example, is to create a consumer agency whose only job will be to protect consumers. Right now, consumer protection is done by the bank regulators as kind of an afterthought. And the credit card bill is an example. We passed a good credit card bill, but in the time it took to take effect, they played some games. It is now in effect now. It's got good protections. People are going to find that they're not going to get retroactive rate increases on money they already owe. They're not going to have games played with the bills they owe. If the mail is held up, it's not going to be coming out of their pockets. But it would have been nice if we had an agency in existence full time to prevent the game playing. That's very much an issue. So yeah, we're going to get a test in the Senate. And what's sad to me is that every single Republican in the House voted against that agency. And there was also a very interesting article in the New York Times recently that the banks have now started putting on, not the banks only, but the financial institutions, have put a lot of money into trying to defeat this. So we're going to see what's going to happen in the Senate. But it is a problem.
And then lastly, we also talked about, if you remember in the State of the Union, Barack Obama, one of the things he suggested was, what about forgiving all student loans after 20 years? And I just don't see how that's financially viable. And Barney Frank actually said that military spending plays into this. Here's his answer. You decide if you think that this makes sense.
Unless you adjust America's greatly overextended military activity, we are the policemen of the world. We're the peacekeeper of the world. We don't do that well. I voted against the war in Iraq. I lost. We went in. But I can't understand why anybody thinks we should still be there. We're refereeing political disputes in Kurdistan or between the Shiites and the Sunnis.
Helmand Province lately. It's like the big deal is Helmand Province. I'm thinking, what have we been doing there this long? Helmand Province.
We have greatly overextended ourselves. And look, when young Americans are in battle, we're going to give them everything they can get. But the trick is to keep them out of those battles in the first place, not to have them overextended the way they are. The only way to accomplish the goal the president talks about there and elsewhere is to reduce military spending substantially by reducing our commitments. And that's one of the things I'm going to start working on.
And that would allow forgiveness of student loans after 20 years?
If we could put a lot of money into our quality web, yes, it would.
I think that maybe it would allow for some money, but it's true. The overwhelming amount that is military spending could pay for just about everything else. There's no question about that. But whether that would make it viable and reasonable to simply forgive all student loans after 20 years, I don't know.
Right. I don't think that will ever happen. But the spending is outrageous. I mean, that's what Ron Paul pretty much ran his whole campaign on, and we haven't heard much about it since. You know?
No, we really haven't.
But it is. It's crazy. I mean, think about how much money we could be saving if, we didn't have bases all over the world, if we weren't fighting these wars.
It's true, but then there's the argument to be made, Louis, just to, we have to play devil's advocate here. If we didn't have those, would the U.S. be in danger? would there be more risks from terrorist attacks in other countries?
Some people say yes, some people say no. I don't know.
Well, thanks to Congressman Barney Frank for sitting down with me on short notice. We'll be back after this. Please check us out on Facebook. If you have a Facebook account, just search for Midweek Politics. You'll easily find us. We'll be back after this.
Midweek Politics with Dave Pakman on midweekpolitics.com.
This episode of Midweek Politics has been made possible in part by Just Coffee Cooperative, fair trade coffee from around the world roasted daily at justcoffee.coop.